Here. Welcome. If you have just tuned in, which we presume you have just tuned in because we've just gone live here, we are going behind the lens with some of the photographers who make Oregon Natural Desert Association's conservation work come to life. So we'll dive in momentarily, but wanted to just give a few people time to tune in. They're entering the waiting room now. They're filtering in as you would walk into a room in real life. But here it is in December 2020, and we're all way too used to Zoom. So we are there. All right. Getting started. Welcome to Oregon Natural Desert Association. This is the high desert. If you're not familiar with ONDA, we are a conservation group with 5,063 members as of today. You're welcome to join us at any time and up that number if you're not already a member. We are focused on watching the public lands that are in the high desert ecosystem, and that's really kind of everything east of Bend, Oregon, all the way to Boise, Idaho, and from the John Day River Basin down to the Sheldon National Wildlife Refuge in northern Nevada. So we are Oregon-based, but we extend into Nevada because that's our high desert ecosystem. And we have a conservation program and a restoration program, and both of these major efforts are just fueled by the members that we are able to recruit. And part of how we recruit people to join our cause and stick up for this desert is through the wonderful photography that we share. So tonight we thought we'd take some time to talk to some of the people that share their photos with us. So you've seen these images before. This is a beautiful snowy scene from Heart Mountain. It's by Jim Davis. And what I think is so inspiring about all the photographers you're going to hear from tonight is that photography is their side passion. They have other careers. Jim was doing high-end construction, building homes, and turned to conservation photography as a passion. We'll talk all more about it, so I'll just very briefly. So we're going to talk to Jim Davis. Barb Roomer shot this beautiful image of the Oahe. She is a retired financial planner. I think she is very excited about being retired because she's extremely active in all sorts of outdoor pursuits, hiking, climbing, skiing, or hiking, cycling, skiing, all sorts of wonderful things. She'll tell more of her stories. And then we'll be hearing from Bruce Couch, who is a design firm owner. He runs the Bodie Group and does, again, photography on the side, and we're so happy about that. And he is also, I just learned, a former rock and roll lighting professional. So little things that I have learned in the process of pulling this event together. I asked everyone here to share some particular images with us. Actually, I'm going to jump back for a moment. What I wanted to kind of tease out from people is what a favorite place was. I want one story that tells a really good, like one shot with a really good story, and one that captures your hopes for the high desert. So each of the photographers will share 3 images with you, and we will start with Barb. Thank you, Barb.
Okay, so Steens in the fall, and I love the broad expanses, the sky, the steep escarpments of the Steens, and I've always loved aspen. You know, I hear the sound of their fluttering leaves, and to me it's magic. For several years, I had the goal of photographing fall Steens, and my research said the Steens had some of the largest aspen stands in Oregon. It also said the Steens are unique and that this area lacks conifers, so aspen dominate the gorges. And my eyes said that orange, yellow, and red of fall aspen bring a vibrant color to photographs that shout fall. So best timing when? This photo was actually taken October 8th, 2014. So research, I looked at NOAA weather, I called BLM to get their info on color change, and off I go. I sleep in my car for ultimate flexibility. I'm photographing the Steens escarpment during the day, but I'm also looking for that west-facing area where the setting sun backlights the glowing yellow aspen leaves. We can talk about this later, but backlighting is really important in fall photography. And I was also hoping for a few clouds, which made at least some red in the sky. And it worked this time. It was a gift. I didn't have to drive to Colorado for the aspen fall color, and I was given the fall gift of beauty in this unique desert ecosystem.
Nice. We always love sharing this particular image. Everyone always lights up when we share it on social media. I did want to also just chime in to say that later on, we will be giving away some Wild Desert calendars. So please stay tuned for that. If you are participating, you may be a lucky winner of that. And I also want to let people know that we are going to take a Q&A. So as each of these photographers are sharing their stories with you, there will also be an opportunity for you to ask them questions. So as you queue up your questions, be sure to send those questions to Hannah. She is marked as a co-host. And so if you see the option, send questions to Hannah, we're trying to direct you there. So as you continue to listen, we're going to keep diving into the high desert here. That is something to think about. Tell us about this place. Is this like Greeley Bar maybe in the Oahe?
Yeah, this was in the Oahe. So I had heard about rafting the Oahe about 25 years ago when I lived in Medford with its amazing canyons. Yeah, only a very short window to raft it, if at all. Starry nights, quintessential wilderness, all of that. So I had heard about it a long time ago. And for the last 5 years, I'd explored different parts of the Oahe that I could reach in my little trusty Subaru. So I have been to the Little Oahe, which is another drainage and canyon. And I'd also been down to the Birch Creek Takeout on the main Oahe. And so this is accessed, if nobody's been there yet, down a steep four-wheel drive road. The river's there, but also lots of canyons to hike and explore. And that these canyons lead up to plateaus that have expansive views of the river. But I had neither the skills nor the equipment to raft the wild and scenic solo, which the Oahe is a class 4 river. So I signed up for the 5-day annual On to Work party that rafted the wild stretch with an outfitter. I was on the wait list for 4 years because low water prevented some raft trips, but finally my number came up and I could go, and I was absolutely jazzed. So now I could finally experience what I'd heard about for years. Some flat water, some class 4 rapids, some bighorn sheep, steep walls, each had their own crazy names, side canyons with caves, petroglyphs, spring flowers, and of course, nights with glowing stars in the deep wilderness. And I wanted to photograph that all. I was excited to immerse myself in all of these experiences. And by the way, this section of the Oahe has wild and scenic river status within a quarter mile of the land adjoining, but the upland lands are in various levels of protection, from no protection to WSA. So knowing, our importance for protection, it was important for me to see this firsthand so I could accurately advocate for protection in the upcoming bills. Part of what I love about the Oahe is the intimacy of the deep canyons, but also what I love is climbing out of the canyons to plateau tops to get extensive views of the wild, unobstructed land with clouds as only the desert can bring. So yes, this is a daytime shot, not one of those sunrise color things, but it does show a sense of place that photographers aspire. So my hopes and dreams, we had to talk about hopes and dreams of these places. My hopes and dreams is that lands adjoining to the wild and scenic Owyhee River deserve wilderness designation and permanent protection under the Wilderness Act. I hope my photographs inspire others as to the beauty and special nature of these places, so the other people too can advocate for protection with this upcoming legislative bill. And I'm sure Lacey will talk about that later.
Well, I'm just going to talk about it right now for just a moment and tell you, because you guys don't know this yet, Bruce, Jim, Barb, everyone tuned in. Senator Wyden was actually on the Senate floor today talking to Congress and asking them to support the Malheur County Community Empowerment for the Owyhee Act. And there was a giant photo of the Owyhee behind him as he did that. And he talked for 28 minutes or so about how important this legislation, how important this place is, how important this legislation is, how many people have come together and have advocated for it. So just want you all to know your voices are heard. People are advocating for this place, and yeah, keep it up, because it made a big move today on the Senate floor, and we're in a really good position for this legislation going forward. Okay, next photo. Tell us about the sage-grouse.
Okay, so this is my kind of unique story of some of my wilderness desert things. So there are so many unique birds in the eastern desert. People probably know burrowing owls, golden eagles, horned larks, sage thrashers, but the sage grouse is the iconic bird of the high desert. It's also the lightning rod in political debates and desert management of the sage steppe ecosystem. You know, its fabulous mating dance is known, and I wanted to get close. So I signed up as a citizen scientist with ODFW to monitor Lex, sage-grouse Lex, in March and April. And I actually have volunteered 5 different years. Now, we signed an oath to secrecy of the Lek locations, so I can't tell you where this was taken. We're given the Lek locations to go and count the number of males and females on the Lek. So I camp alone on some 2-track road, hoping I don't get stormed in or stuck in the mud at that time of year. It's a possibility. Freezing nights with 0 to 25 degrees at night. I get up in the dark 1 to 2 hours before sunrise. Ski clothes and hand warmers are mandatory in this cold pre-dawn. I use my GPS to stumble across the sagebrush to a predetermined spot. Close, but not too close to the Lek. And obviously I'm carrying heavy gear. I'm carrying my spotting scope, binocs, camera with my heavy 500 millimeter lens and teleconverter. And I set up before first light to get in place to count these male and female grouse. And I do want to say ethics are imperative here as far as how close. Humans getting too close or disturbing the Leks could mean 0 nesting success. And we're all aware of that. And actually, it's the females who are the most sensitive to humans coming and disturbing the Leks, rather than necessarily the males. But you don't want to get in the way of their mating dance and the females picking out which male they want to mate with. So I count the males and the females. Sometimes the Leks are full of birds. Sometimes the Lek I was given is vacant, but all of this is good data to help ODFW manage this iconic, lovely desert bird. And yes, just talking about the photo, even with my large lens, I still have to crop my photos because I don't want to get too close to the birds. But my reward is communing with the birds and the antelope that wander through the lek at the same time, seeing the vast starry nights, looking at the desert belly flowers during the daytime, and seeing this incredible iconic bird on its booming ground.
So cool. Thank you for being part of this effort, Barb, to monitor the sage grouse. I am extremely jealous of that. I love that your partner at home is so interested that he probably does not notice that he's also on the YouTube live with you. But, you know, everybody loves sage grouse. They're popular. They're so popular. Barb, thank you so much for sharing these stories. I love them. And please be ready for answering all sorts of questions, because I'm sure people will want to know more about how you got on that Oahe raft trip after 4 years, and probably more questions about the sage grouse as well. All right, it's time to go from the uplands and the grassland to the more barren playa. Bruce, you're up. Please say hello to our viewers at home.
How you doing? I shot this obviously in winter out at the Alvord Desert. When I went out there was about 8 inches of snow on top of an inch or two of ice on top of mud. One thing about the Alvord Desert, if you've been there, you probably know this. If you haven't, you should know this, that if it gets wet, it'll just swallow a vehicle. I mean, it is almost impossible to get out if you get into the mud. So you need to pay attention. The first time I went out there, the first day I got there, I went out there, it was 25 degrees, started driving my truck out there, and it broke through the ice. Fortunately, I had enough momentum to get back off. So we went back the next day, and it was about 15 degrees. So we tried it again and got out into the middle of the playa where I took this shot. One of the things I absolutely love about the Alvord Desert is how the light hits out there and what it does. This is a shot looking north at Mickey Butte. Funny story with this one. I was out there with 3 friends in my truck, and we were all alone, and all of a sudden I see a vehicle driving by about 3 miles away, and it looked somewhat familiar. So I picked up the phone and called my friend Jamie Piles and asked him where he was, and he happened to be the one driving across the playa. So we were the only ones crazy enough to be out there, but it was it's an amazing place. And one thing you have to do when you go out to a place like this is be prepared. We carry shovels. I have tracks for if I get stuck. I have a winch. You definitely want to pay attention to conditions. One thing I will tell you about Alvord as well is if it rains a lot and it turns to mud, you probably best to just stay put for, it'll probably, if the rain stops, it usually will go away within hours. The ground just absorbs the water, but if you try driving out when it's wet, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, that's kind of counterintuitive. Okay, next story. And we will, as you're listening, you'll note that our photography advice starts to blend in with safety advice when it comes to the desert. So stay tuned for more of that. Ooh, tell us about this.
As Jim knows, I like to shoot a lot of black and white, and I've been giving him crap about the fact that the calendar's all color, but that's okay. I can live with that. This is inside Leslie Gulch. One of the things I love about this shot, well, first off, this is shot with an infrared converted camera. So the light you're seeing is infrared light. The camera all digital cameras have a filter in them that blocks infrared light and allows visible light through. This camera has been modified to see infrared light, and it blocks visible light. One of the things I love about this shot is all of the light on the left-hand side of the screen is reflected light. You're in a canyon, so the sun is hitting full force on the right-hand side of the screen on cliff faces over there, and that is what's reflecting here. One of the things that you have to do to get a good photograph generally out there and anywhere in the desert is have some patience and wait for the right conditions. If you miss them, you miss them. You just go back again and do it again. It's an interesting place. One other story about this one is I went here with a friend of mine, Gary Randall, and we drove into Leslie Gulch. And at the top entrance of it, there was a sign that said "Incident Ahead." And the gate wasn't closed, so we just drove in. When we got in, there was a full-on firefighting effort going on because this area had been hit by lightning and there was some wildfires going on. And we asked the guy if we could stay, and he said, "Was the gate open?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Sure, you can stay." And we started driving through, and the sheriff came and stopped us. And when the sheriff stopped us, he asked what we were doing, and we said we're photographers. When he heard that, he kind of lit up and handed us his business card and asked him to send pictures. And then when we asked what should we do if we see fire coming, he said, "Go the other way." So we did.
Sound advice, I guess. Okay, more stories. Ooh. Yet another stunning image. Please share more.
This is above Leslie Gulch, looking north towards Oahe Lake. The area around Leslie Gulch and like Birch Creek Ranch, Sucker Creek is amazing. There's a lot of really cool formations. Tell you, in the summertime, it can get really hot. This was shot in springtime. And as Barb had mentioned, it can get pretty cold in springtime. We were pretty comfortable during the day, but it can get into the, around 20 degrees at night. If you go out to Leslie Gulch, and if you haven't been there, it's not a kind of destination where you stop on your way to somewhere. This is about 25 miles in off on a dirt road off of Highway 95 before it drops into Boise and Idaho. So that's about it on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all these tales with us. I am excited to hear what kind of questions people have for you. And now let's see. Oh, I'll just say a quick word about this one before you start, Jim. This is the cover of the 2021 Wild Desert Calendar. So if you are an ONDA member, you've already received your calendar at home. If you're not an ONDA member, you might be able to see it at some local coffee shops or places that are still open, like grocery stores. And you can pick up a copy of the Wild Desert Calendar, and you can order it online on our website as well. Tell us more about this. Now tell us more about the story behind this shot, Jim. This beautiful, beautiful shot.
Well, I'm going to have to share the location. It is Mickey Basin, and it is over the years sort of become my go-to spot for, I can always find something new to take a picture of here. It's north of the Alvord Desert, and it just has a real variety of terrain and features, vegetation. It sort of reminds me of Death Valley a little bit. It's just got a lot of just really cool and very arid related features, salt formations on the playa. This was 2011, which was a really one of the wettest years I've seen in the desert for a long time, and the playa was completely full of water, which is just sort of crazy. It's really rare that you see any standing water out there. It's a different type of playa than the Alvord. It's not a mud playa. It's more of a alkaline crust. So I don't know, it doesn't get that skim of water on it like the Alvord does. But you know, this was at the height of when I was really working a lot with my construction. And that spring, I was cursing because I couldn't get out. It was just so busy. And I knew this wet cycle of the spring weather with all these thunderstorms was going to come to an end. And I saw an extended forecast and sort of knew that the summer was coming with those endless blue skies that photographers hate. And I figured I better grab this one last opportunity. So I did a mad dash to get out here on a Saturday morning, loaded my truck up, drove like a maniac to get out there because I knew I had to get up on this ridge that I'd been scoping on how to get up there for one, and knew that it would have some good views, and just knew the weather was going to cooperate for a change. On my mad dash to get in there, I exploded all my water containers in the back of my truck, which was not a great thing to do, but I inventoried my water and realized I had just enough for coffee in the morning, and I had you know, probably a 12-pack of Rainier or something like that to keep myself alive. So I was able to get up on top of the ridge about an hour before sunset. So, and I just shot continuously as long as I felt was safe to stay on top of the ridge and be able to get back down this exceedingly rocky, loose gully to get back to my truck. So I took as many pictures as I could. This is a second picture from that evening that has been in the Wild Desert calendar over the years. My you know, little moment of mortality on the way down the gully in the dark was first my headlamp started to go on me, and I had to switch batteries without dropping any batteries that I would lose in the dark, or, you know, just fumbling the switch. And then I stepped on a very large pile of loose rock on my way down the gully, and went crashing into the landscape, and sort of looked around and counted my blessings because no one knew where I was, and it would have been.
I'm gonna ask you if you had a safety plan and everyone knew where to come looking for you.
Generally, I did so many solo trips for years that I would just go and, you know, not think too much that, oh, I should probably let somebody know where I was going. But you get sort of cocky on that aspect sometimes.
Yeah. Jim, we have a question. Someone would like to know, and I agree, what are those mountains on the far right of the picture in the backdrop there?
Well, I like this picture. It shows a lot of variety. It's got the snowy mountains are the Steens. So this is in May, and so there was still lots of storms and snow being deposited in the Steens. In the far distance, that really light line is the Alvord Playa. That's the big dark mountain with the sun accent is Mickey Butte, which Bruce had a picture of from the other side.
And can you name all of the forbs, all of the wildflowers in the foreground, all of the shrubs? Okay.
Well,
yeah.
the foreground more yellowy shrub is shad scale, which you see in these real salty basin areas. And it's nestled in with some sagebrush, which I thought was such a nice combination.
This is what I get for trying to ask hard questions. You know all the answers. All right, take us into this canyon and tell us what's happening here.
Well, this is, I mean, they're all favorite places after a while, but this place had a good story to it. It was a canyon that I spied from a distance on my very first trip to the Hawaii in 1993, I believe. And I sort of knew it was there based on studying topographic maps. You know, I used to love looking at maps, and you would see these like places where the lines just got dense and dark, and you knew there was like a lot happening there because, you know, the upper expanse of the Owyhee is just big plains, beautiful plains of sagebrush. But these canyons are just like carved with like a knife through these plateaus. And so I don't know how many years it took, maybe 15 years later, I was out in the Owyhee again with a good friend of mine, an old climbing buddy, and we were trying to find our way to one other place in the Owyhee, and we got completely lost for a good part of the day. And when we finally figured out where we were, I realized, oh, I think we're near that canyon I saw years ago just in the distance. And sure enough, we found a way into this amazing canyon. And I've gone there. It's a backpacking destination for me. And I just love to be able to hang out there. And so this was a backpacking trip with another wild desert photographer, Tyson Fisher, in 2013. And we just found like, you know, all-time best campsite. You know, it was great, and had a full moon illuminating the plateau and the walls above us, but we never got the straight shot of the full moonlight in the canyon. So it was with this nice combination of the dark with the you can see stars in the sky above. But we had a little campfire, and I hiked up on this rock above camp, left a headlamp on. I always take 2 headlamps and in my tent, and we started playing with just throwing twigs on the fire to just get enough of a flare up to see what it would work for the proper illumination of the walls right around us. It was a very memorable evening.
Nice. So that was some good secret sharing on the tips if people were listening. I like it. Okay, now we're not at night, we're in the middle of the day, and we're in a very different place than deep in that canyon.
Yeah, so I've been really lucky to get involved with a couple of overflights of the desert, mostly centered around the Hart Mountain in the greater Hart-Sheldon area, which is this massive interconnected landscape that serves as migration corridors for the antelope, pronghorn, lots of uninterrupted sage for the sage grouse, and all sorts of other critters. So this was a flight in 2017, another really wet year. So every little tiny little thing that ever dreamed of being a lake had a little bit of water in it. And this was just one of those, you can look at maps and drive around and look at the desert, but until you fly over some of these areas, you just don't know how spectacular some of these geologic features are. So that's Juniper Mountain sort of in the middle distance with these rims sort of surrounding it. And in the far distance is Hart Mountain. You can see the Rabbit Hills, Steens Mountains out there somewhere. It just gives you a great perspective to see how connected all these different spots are when you can see how they relate to each other from the air. And on this flight, this was right before, this was the evening flight, the sunset flight. Jeremy Austin and I were just sort of turned and looked at each other when some of these views would come, you know, as the airplane was flying by, because you just never expected to see sort of jaw-dropping landscape features.
You don't expect that this is a place that is just out our back door, and it is as wide open and as wild as places that you would think would be in South America or Alaska, or like somewhere where you know that there's this much room, but like it's there, it's wide open.
Yeah, and this whole area here is going to be in the news with the, I guess the big review that's coming out with the BLM for that big larger landscape for Hart Sheldon area this coming
Yes, ONDA members have been so great about advocating for this landscape. And I will just chime in to say one more thing. If you like these kinds of photos from the air and of Jim's photos of the Greater Hart Sheldon region, stay tuned in January. We're going to have a beautiful Greater Hart Sheldon story map that is going to be very richly textured with these images. So you will enjoy that, people. Okay, I think I'm going to stop screen sharing for a little while and move into our question time. So you all have been thinking about questions as you watched these photographers tell their stories, and you have queued them up for sending them to Hannah, and she is dutifully sending them my way. I'm going to start with a question, sort of a question statement. Do you guys know this about conservation photography? This is how integral it is. This is how integral photography is to conservation. It was actually David Brower at the Sierra Club that invented the coffee table book. Didn't have coffee table books before that. It was only because he needed to show people those landscapes in a larger format and had this idea to pair them with stories and photos to do this. So just saying, that's how important, it's like neck and neck with conservation is photography. So thank you for sharing that. And did you know that? That's my question for you. You invented the coffee table book. Okay, questions? Oh my gosh, these are good. Process. Can you each tell us, oh, you know what? Just, we'll get in the questions and then we'll wrap up with advice. How about that as an idea? Okay. So if there's any question that's been left unturned, you'll all have a chance to share advice at the end. Okay, so just headsing you up to that. Can you each tell us a little bit about your process from the field to the photograph? How much time of day, and how much does time of day matter when photographing the high desert? So that's a separate question, but start with process and then segue into like sunset, sunrise, time of day. How does that factor in? Bruce, it seems like you want to go first.
I do? Okay.
Seems like it.
Well, I use photography as an excuse. It's my reason for going to some of these places. I'm finding the more I go, the less I'm shooting, and the better the images I'm getting now than I was 5 years ago. My process is I shoot all this stuff. I come home, I dump it on my laptop, and I process my images. I'm a fairly lazy photographer when it comes to processing. Typically, I have friends that'll spend weeks processing images. I spend about 10 to 20 minutes typically. If it's really something I'm really deep into, I might spend 45 minutes working on it. But that's about it on the process. As far as the light and the time of day, I'm not one of these people that believes that sunrise and sunset are the best times to shoot. As you saw in one of my shots, I had a black and white shot of Leslie Gulch. That was shot pretty much in the middle of the day. This is one of the reasons that I own infrared cameras as well as regular cameras. The infrared works great when there's a lot of light. So middle of the day, direct sunlight, that's all good. With the infrared camera, skies tend to go a lot darker when you're processing them. And so it's not quite the boring blue sky. You can actually tone back the skies. to where they're quite dark, but they really create a contrast between that and your subjects. I do shoot sunset a lot. I don't shoot sunrise that often because I don't like waking up early. And
There.
if you want to take pictures of night skies, I really haven't found many places better than Southeast Oregon.
Statement.
Just one quick story. I went out there once with a friend from Edinburgh, Scotland, who we were sitting in a chair one night looking at the stars. It was a new moon, and just also happened to be an aurora that was visible in our cameras. It wasn't something we could see with our naked eye, but we're sitting there looking at the stars, and he turns to me and says, "I've never seen so many stars in my life." And I said, "Yeah, it's pretty impressive." And he goes, "No," he goes, "You don't understand. I've cumulatively never seen stars in my life." It's a special feeling to be able to sit somewhere and look at the Milky Way and see it go from horizon to horizon.
It really is. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the dark skies. I'll just add that I spent a night in Logan Valley once and I couldn't sleep. I would try to sleep and then I'd be like, no, I gotta look again. I gotta poke my head out the tent and look, because it was the same. It was like, what?
There's one thing that I would add to that, and that is that I have a lot of friends that go, "Hey, the Perseids are going." And after, Jim may be able to relate to this, and Barb too, after going out into the desert a lot and spending a lot of nights out there, the meteor showers, the publicized meteor showers are less impressive to me because you see meteors all the time out there. It's rare that I've been out there and not seen meteors. It's an amazing place.
But in case you do want to time your desert visit to meteor showers, you'll find that in our calendar. Barb,
Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit about process, but I'm going to segue as well, because people always want to know about equipment. I'm going to hesitate before I ask you about equipment because a photographer friend of mine once said, nobody asks a writer what kind of pen they use. And it's a fair point. No one asks a writer, like, was that in Microsoft Word or were you using Google Docs when you typed that out? Fair question. So I think answer the camera question, answer the equipment question if you want, or focus on your creative process. Up to you.
Well, I must say, things have changed so much in the last 5 years, especially with cell phones, that people with cell phones are taking just as intense a photo now as, sometimes, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago. So that just brings us back to, is it the camera or is it the person's eye? And I would say that, 80% of it is the person's eye and what they're seeing. I mean, if you're shooting birds, cell phones don't do real well with telephotos. But, I've just seen incredible stuff with people with their cell phones now. And so the process of going out into the desert and trying to find what speaks to you. Now, sometimes sunrises speak to people. Sometimes macro shots of these tiny half-inch little flowers in the desert speak to you. So sometimes it's the broad expanses with the gargantuan clouds just wisping across, the sky. So, it depends on equipment, but you can do fabulous photos now with cell phones that you weren't able to a long time ago. So I think the thing is get out there and find something that speaks to you, and then just try seeing if you you can capture it.
Yeah. That's good. And I think when you start talking about like knowing where to look, that gets into a little bit of just like really knowing the desert and like knowing what you might see as a good shot. Jim,
Well,
before we, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, yeah. Well, but you have to go and experience it. And the more you go out there, the more that it's like, oh, this is an old friend, this flower's an old friend, or this spot's an old friend, and I recognize this one. I mean, some people get really techie and take all their guidebooks and all their maps, and that works for them. And other people just go out and, hopefully have a map for safety, but just go out and experience it, and something appears in their photographs. Yeah.
Jim, would you like to chime in on process, or do you want a new question?
No, I'll weigh in on that one, I guess, a little bit.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's funny, people, whenever I go out somewhere, because people know I like to take pictures of the desert, they say, well, did you get any good pictures? And it's like, I have no idea. I don't, a lot of times, like the cover picture for next year's calendar, I took that in 2011. I didn't really look at that picture till a year or so ago. I like to, I'll tell people, no, my images are being processed, and they look at you like, what, you're shooting film? No, I'm not shooting film, but I like to put some distance between when I took the picture and when I actually go and process it on my computer, because then I sort of have a memory of what I think the image should look like, rather than maybe trying to be exactly literal with what was going on. Not that I'm changing things, but I sort of like to let it stew a bit in my mind, I guess, before I go back and really start messing with images. And like I say, sometimes that could be years.
Can I add to that real quick? Most of us shoot RAW files. For those of you unfamiliar with that, most of the higher end cameras a RAW file is simply a file that collects all the data. When I look at a file on my camera, it looks pretty boring because it's flat, doesn't have a lot of contrast, doesn't have a ton of color. And quite often I'll shoot a shot with my phone to remind me what the scene looked like, so that when I go to process it, I can pull it back closer to what my phone shows the colors were. Typically when we're processing, or when I'm processing, I'm adding some contrast. I'm doing a little bit of sharpening. I'm adjusting exposure accordingly. I'm messing a bit with the highlights and the shadow detail. But the RAW files don't give you an accurate depiction of the scene until they're processed. There's a lot of people that take a lot of liberties with that process. I try my best to keep things relatively the way I saw them. Yeah, you should keep that in mind when you're shooting RAW files.
That's it. Okay, I think I'm ready to segue into kind of some final words of advice for people. So, as we mentioned, the desert photography is kind of specific, like it needs some specific advice. So as we were kind of brainstorming about where to start, because there's a lot of tutorials out there, we're not going to teach you everything about photography tonight. What we wanted to really tease out is what's a specific tip to the desert. And I know that each of you have been desert photographers for a very long time. And if you want to chime in with like how long you've been shooting in the desert as you kind of provide this backdrop, what's one piece of advice you can give to those who are tuning in to kind of take their photographs up a notch and be in the next Wild Desert calendar or featured in Ondas publications or shared with your friends and family? Like what would really help them to take great desert photos? Who wants to go first? Barb?
Hmm. Well, number one, I think Stacy will do this later on, but going out into the desert, you need to be more aware than in other locations, just on all the safety precautions, because the desert, you're way more into the wilderness than other places. But planning, especially since the desert has such broad expanses of sky. When I do my planning, I always like to look at NOAA and look at how much cloud covers there's going to be. So if I'm going to be able to, with the time I have, obviously, and some people can only do it on their days off, but if I'm going to be having skies with clouds, that might give you lots more interest in your photo than a plain blue sky. So I would look for that. I would be aware of sunlight, early and late, or whether you get side lighting. And a lot of times too, especially in the desert, and I know that Jim and Bruce have had photos from where they're on tops of buttes. Elevation and looking down on the broad expanse of the desert somehow gives a broader expanse and a grander feel. Just maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Fall backlight of color, intensify color, and overcast days sometimes brings out the saturation in colors.
Okay.
So don't always look for those clear bluebird skies to get your best photo.
Jim, final piece of advice from you?
I think the thing that is really important is just to really know your landscape. Go to the same place numerous times, is obvious, to get it figured out for light. Obviously, Bruce goes to the Alvord Desert a lot. I've been to Mickey Basin, I don't know, how many times. But the other thing is to really know the landscape, is to know what you're taking a picture of, know what's going on with the geology, the plant's life, the interaction of the water and the politics, the issues that are affecting that, grazing, how grazing has affected the vegetation you're looking at. Are you taking pictures of a bunch of weeds? Or are you taking pictures of something that is a relatively intact natural landscape? I can't stress more, just really learn what you're taking pictures of.
Yeah. And then taking the pictures lets you do that, right? You can come home and be like, what is that plant? And kind of identify it too.
Yeah, I don't know how many pictures I've rejected out of my computer, or slides that have gone into the garbage can because there was something there that just really irritated me that shouldn't be there. The hand of man.
Bruce, final words of advice, specific desert photography advice for people?
I'm going to go back to the safety thing. There's two things. The safety is one of them. And a lot of the places we go are very remote. A lot of the places we go require driving on a lot of dirt roads and gravel roads. Eastern Oregon shale is notorious for popping tires. You want to carry fixed flat. You want to make sure your spare is good. You want to carry a shovel. You need to have things to be prepared for the environment you're going into. I can't stress that enough. I mean, I've pulled maybe 10 cars out of the mud at Alvord Desert. One that had been sitting there for an entire day. The couple had gone through all of their water. They'd gone through all their food. They were stuck out in the middle of the desert.
About all their beer, did they still?
They didn't have anything, but you just have to be prepared for the environment you're going into. The other thing I want to talk about really briefly is one of the shots that you saw of mine was shot with a drone. In a wilderness area, you cannot fly a drone. In technically in a wilderness study area, a drone is okay to fly. But what I will tell you is, whenever I fly my drone, I always look at the environment and look to see if there's anyone I'm going to disturb with that drone. You do not want to be flying drones and ruining somebody else's wilderness experience. The image I have of Oahe Lake, I was at the campsite at the end of Leslie Gulch, took the drone up and flew it immediately out of the campsite area so that it wasn't bugging anybody. And then I went looking for my shot. The drones have a range of a couple miles, but you want to make sure that you're staying under the 400 feet altitude limitation. You want to make sure that you have an idea exactly where your drone is. You do not want to fly your drone around, say, a backside of a mountain or something like that, where you don't have direct line of sight. It's a great way to lose a drone because they'll lose transmission and it's a problem. You're in for a long hike if you do that.
Yeah, and I'll add 2 notes to that. Not wanting to disturb anyone includes wildlife. So sometimes that's hard to know. So it's best to really err on the side of caution. And also wilderness study areas we think should be treated as wilderness, though it would be technically legal to do so. We're hoping that because they're wilderness study areas, they could someday be wilderness. So. And
I'll add to that I've been using my drone images to help get places designated wilderness areas. Everything I've shot in the desert, I've made available to ONDA. They're the only organization that I've done that to. Which we so appreciate. I'm glad to help. Yes. So, I hope that Alvord gets designated a wilderness area. One other thing about Alvord, when I first went there, I wanted to see how fast my truck went. So I got up to 105 miles an hour and I'm driving across the desert. And I didn't think much about it until the last couple of years. There's been gigantic dust storms out at the Alvord Desert. And it's because of the increased traffic and the speed in which people drive. And like I said, I'm as guilty as everybody else with that. But I have come to the position that I want to try to keep my impact on that desert as small as I can. And I've slowed way down when I'm driving out there. And I would recommend everyone else do the same.
You never know what you might see when you slow down. That's true. I would just like to thank everyone who has tuned in for asking such wonderful questions, making such wonderful comments. I've seen the chat, it's just bubbling alive with comments. And I want to invite people to see more of the work from all these photographers. And just to note, these are 3 of the wonderful photographers who contribute to ONDA, but we have many more and all wonderful. Some are probably tuned in tonight, I hope. Thank you all. And you can follow ONDA on Instagram to see more of our work. You can check out our website, onda.org, and you can pick up a Wild Desert calendar, as we noted. But one really fun thing that's not always the case is that we do have an exhibit up that's a virtual exhibit. It's called A Year in Oregon's High Desert, and it features all of the images from the 2021 Wild Desert calendar. So that's an exciting thing. And I'll just say one more quick note on this Wild Desert calendar cover image. I know that behind Jim, there's a beautiful framed print. And I feel as though, it's this way, this side, I feel as though he might have a little story he can tell us about that print and the possibility of it being available. Maybe, I think he might be able to tell us about that.
Yeah, well, like getting back, I hadn't looked at this picture for a long time. And when I was looking for something to submit for the calendar for 2021, I found this in my archives and thought, wow, I'd overlooked this image and I checked it all out. It was really sharp, that the exposure was correct and everything. And I took it to a friend of mine I've been really fortunate, a master printer that moved to Bend a few years ago. And him and I worked up this print. And we printed it on, and he can do really good job of bringing up just all the detail in the print and the contrast and the light. And so we printed two copies of it on canvas. And I wanted one for myself, and I decided I would just go ahead and get a second copy done and get it framed and donate it to Onda in the hopes that somebody would buy this image and contribute that money 100%, not getting any money for this picture, to Onda's, ongoing battle. And this year has been a difficult one for all the environmental organizations with the COVID lockdown and such. So, I think Onda has it on their website, or, you could look at it as a real bonus for a year-end contribution to Onda. To come away with this print. I've got it up in my living room and it looks really nice. So it's a 20 by 30 canvas print mounted on board with framing. It's all printed here in Bend, framed here in Bend.
I imagine you signed it.
And it's all signed, yeah.
Fine. So there you have it. If you would like to purchase a very unique signed framed print, you can do that. So just a fun year-end thing for people there. I think with that, I will wrap this up and wish everyone a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Who gets the free calendars?
Oh my gosh. Stop recording and then we'll draw for the calendars. And we'll turn off the YouTube and then we'll draw for just everyone here.
Thank you.